Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Sauna. Thanks for joining us for another session where we sweat out the hot topics in security. So welcome to all our listeners, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at #CyberSound. Cybersecurity has never been a hotter field to get into, but how do you gain the skills needed for landing a job? There are various paths to a cybersecurity career, from a formal university education to being a self-taught hacker. Today we're talking to our guests about cybersecurity education from both a student and a teacher perspective. Yes, Rasimus is a recent graduate from F-Secure's Cybersecurity Academy who is now employed with F-Secure, and Tom Van de Wiele is an F-Secure consultant who also has earned his stripes teaching infosec. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So Jesse, what is your background? How did you get into cybersecurity?
Well, my background basically is vocational school.
Mm-hmm.
Vocational school was more focused on physical security.
Okay.
And also not information security, but like computers in general. But yeah, so those are my study backgrounds. As my job background, I have 2 years of physical security guard and then mobile security guard. And then my interest peaked in cybersecurity when I was fooling around with computers and trying to work with computers on my free time.
So it started out as a hobby and then became your
profession?
And
because my friend was basically, he was working in cybersecurity as a consultant. So then I saw his work and it sounded really interesting. And I was like, maybe this is something I want to do also. And then I looked more into it. And then I checked F-Secure's career page, and they had the academy open. So then I was like, well, I'll apply here and see if something comes up. And then,
was there something specific, like working in security as a security guard, like you were already a little bit into security, but was there something that sort of made you flip the switch that I want to switch into full-time cybersecurity?
Well, basically it was when I was doing my night rounds around different offices. I tend to read all these kind of bug bounty write-ups and stuff like that, and different kind of cybersecurity news. And they're really interesting for me. I was thinking that I really want to do that, but I had the physical side. Maybe I can somehow combine the physical side with the more computer side.
That's interesting. What do you think, Tom? The sort of switching from a hobby to career, that's a story we've heard before, but the physical side is a new one.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's good that you found an angle into this whole domain, because most people in the beginning seem to be a little bit overwhelmed with what's out there. Or they go for kind of the headline things of, become a hacker or do this or that without actually having the foundation. So it's quite nice that you found that angle and found that way into kind of expand it into a full-fledged cybersecurity domain, of which, of course, physical is a part, right?
Absolutely.
They don't keep computers in fields. They keep them in secure buildings with locks and keys and
guards.
And guards, exactly. So that can only help you further your career, of course, if you want to stay in that or expand from it. So absolutely.
Yeah, so what's it been like to you, the whole new domain of cybersecurity?
It's been learning a lot of new stuff, because I've basically mostly been on Windows side, but then because Linux is really a big part of my day-to-day work, so then I kind of had to build upon my bare bones Linux experience and learn about from there onwards. But the fact that it's a big challenge for me, I really like that.
So has it been difficult?
Well, in the start it has been difficult, and then I start feeling comfortable for a moment, and then I'm like, oh, this is easy, and then a curveball comes in, and then I'm like, this is actually not so easy than I thought. And
I think that's pretty much the definition of a learning curve is when you don't know anything, and then you start to feel like, oh yeah, I got this, and then you start to realize oh man, I don't know anything.
Yeah. And then there's always the issue of an imposter syndrome. It's
sure.
What if everybody else starts seeing through this veil of lies and smoky mirrors that I think I have up, but then in reality I probably don't have them, and I know much more than I think I do.
Tom, is there anything we can do about the imposter syndrome in educating these kids? Or
I think it's very healthy to have a little dose of imposter syndrome, because it means that you You haven't become that arrogant that you know everything. Because in any domain, I think if you think you've reached the top, there's someone who's going to prove you wrong by something really stupid that will make you think that whatever you learned is going to be on very shaky grounds and how to continue your career and all that.
Yeah.
So it's a very healthy thing to have, I think. A bit of humility.
As long as it doesn't become like crippling.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And on that topic, I mean, throughout the years that I've been teaching, I think it's safe to say that I've almost learned as much from students as I have from people who taught me back in the day, who mentored me in different areas when it comes to the actual domain itself, or writing, or reporting, or dealing with people. And you have the same thing with people who teach kids, for example, because and the words of the famous Richard Feynman, he says, if you cannot explain it to a small child, you haven't understood it.
Yeah, okay.
So you have to force yourself to reinvent it in whatever way. And that will show you new ways of explaining it, and maybe also result in new insights. But also it will help whatever generation you have in front of you to better understand it within their mindset.
No, absolutely. So how did you get into infosec teaching, like instead of...
Teaching came later, obviously. I mean, I got into the business when there wasn't any business.
Right,
There was this one guy, which is one of my personal heroes, which was Peter Zetko, Mudge as he's called. He kind of, with the Loft, was kind of the first company really on the private side or non-industrial contractor side doing consultancy. But the people that I hung out with were system administrators, were network experts, were phone experts, were privacy experts. And I can tell you, back in those days, there's no school to learn dumpster diving.
Right.
So you
I don't think there's a school to learn dumpster diving today. So.
There's still time, Janne. There's still time. This could be a career move. So you have to be out there to learn and to challenge yourself constantly, saying, I want to understand how this works.
Is that did the teaching come because of that, challenging myself?
Yes, and trying to, which is hard, but trying to project that question into others, saying, trying to put the question in their lap, saying, don't you want to know why this happens? Or to show them, or show anyone who's learning something new, show something that you're almost certain they won't understand right off the bat, and it forces them to ask questions. And once you can have those questions kind of bubble up from the person themselves towards whatever topic it is, then you have a very healthy situation. Because this is a moving target. Cybersecurity is constantly being quoted as the one domain where the goalposts are constantly being moved, because we use different systems than that we did 10, 15 years ago. Things or concepts are changing. When we grew up, and there's a bit of a generation gap here, but our version of privacy is completely different from what the kids are using at school these days, where it doesn't even exist anymore.
So has that changing playing field been difficult? Has that been the difficult part to learn in cybersecurity, or what would you say, Jesse, has been the most challenging thing to sort of, what surprised you the most?
I mean, there have been moments in my working day that have been a bit grindy, that it's not always that you go into a system and then you break it and then you have sunglasses on and you're like, I'm in. But it's much, much more like sometimes just grinding the same thing again and again just to find that one goal.
Yeah. It's almost like you're saying that there's like actual work that goes into hacking.
Yeah, it's actually not just all fun and games sometimes.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thunk it?
Yeah. That friend whose job seemed really interesting, he showed like the most glamorous parts, and like he showed like I got in and I could grab these files from here, for example. But then it's really not, in reality, it's not always that way.
No, but that's how they get you.
Yeah.
So you started in our cybersecurity academy, which is like this entry-level training program we have. What was that experience like?
I'd say the cliche is really good. Okay. We started with the basics, and we saw like what's the baseline for everybody. What does everybody know that's in common between everybody, and then start building upon that, and just like get familiar with the different tools and the command line on Linux. Scripting also was something that we started to get familiar with, and then just try and move around with those and
So sort of the common language of information security field.
Yeah, and then we had these kind of mock targets that we use and stuff like Vuln Hub, and we had these kind of like boxes that we were trying to have, and like these kind of web services that were vulnerable, and then we just tried to like break them and then went onwards from that.
So very hands-on.
Yeah, really hands-on.
Okay.
This makes me very jealous, by the way.
Because you didn't have that.
But I mean, my first real, as I said, I come from system administration and went into consultancy. And then the first real consultancy job I had, my manager took me aside and said, Tom, this is a new job that we have to do. We have to get into this place. This job requires the best hackers that we have here in Belgium back in the day.
Yeah.
I got really, you can see me visibly grow. It needs the best. Unfortunately, the best are out of town, and we're going to give it to you.
Oh, that's
how I started my first gig. So I would have loved like a steady ramp up of skills and experience and all that, versus just being thrown in. But that's how you did it back in the day.
No, I'm sure. But then, like Jesse, when you moved from the academy to like actual working life, professional infosec career, did you feel that the academy did a good job in preparing you for that?
In general, yeah. We did these kind of mock-up reports that we do in our day-to-day work and like gigs. We did like a mock-up version of, for example, some kind of online web store that was vulnerable. We wrote like a security report based on that. So that prepared us really well for like our day-to-day work. But then always there are those certain things in the day-to-day work. For example, a client you need to engage with.
Right.
Instead of we had our mentor in the academy. In its own way, it wasn't the same as like client engagement. That's like in real life.
No, I'm sure. Yeah, nothing prepares you for like a live customer encounter.
Who pays?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that in the most positive and in the most negative way, both. So nothing for the good or the bad in real life customer engagements. Like nothing prepares you for that. So, okay, because you're not just a hacker, you're an infosec consultant. So you were talking a little bit about writing reports and that. So the consulting side of this business, was that covered in the academy as well?
It was to an extent, but you can't always go like all the way in because it's a really, really wide array of stuff. The academy was that 1 year, which we had, I think it was like 4 months of like intensive training. That's not enough to cover like the whole array of consultancy and stuff like that. You have to have extra stuff also, like different workshops later on and keep honing your skills.
Yeah, but would you say that the work you did in the academy was like practical enough for you to get like a head start in this business?
Yeah, it was really practical. The route I was thinking about going through is like 5 more years of university, and university doesn't have the hands-on experience that you get like from the academy, for example.
Yeah, I mean, like Tom said, like back in the day, there didn't used to be a lot of university training available for this stuff, but now we're seeing a lot of universities offer that. So is that the formal education? Like, is that a good starting place for this field?
Well, I mean, different institutions and schools and after-work education centers, they try to prioritize cybersecurity in their courses, but the domain is so big that they still have to make a selection. And it's either application security or architecture or privacy with GDPR. So they certainly have value, but it's not going to prepare you for the field or the position or role as being a security consultant and just being there, sitting next to the customer, and being their oracle that you can just ask questions to and then get the right answers to make the right decisions. So it's certainly a help, but there's nothing as good as getting the exposure with the people that are actually buying security, that actually want to have it applied, because they need to make decisions. They want to grow their business. They want to launch that new app or connect two networks together. They need to know the right information to have an overview on the risk to make that decision.
Right.
And the consultant plays a key part of that. So when you did that one master's or that one education or that 1 year of extra extra education when it comes to security. Is that going to cover that? Well, the answer is probably no. But it's certainly a good starting point where then we come to the area of self-motivation and self-education, because there's still a lot in the business when it comes to security that is based on just making sure that you can fill those gaps yourself.
Right, but now we're touching on the age-old problem that education, like actual practical experience, is the best teacher, but you can't get the experience unless you have a job in the field, and you can't get a job in the field because you don't have the experience.
Exactly. I mean, that was a huge chicken and egg problem back in the day. And when I say back in the day, it's like early 2000s, end of the 90s.
Yeah.
Where software was almost not available because you had to have very expensive licenses. You couldn't try things out because there were no real virtualization technologies around. So you had to try things on your own, smaller, older computers or universities or all that. That has all gone away. Now, when it comes to being able to try things out, when it comes to learning things, I mean, documents you can read, online courses you can do, war games and hacking games you can play, virtualization. I would say even right now, there's a little bit too much information about, knowing what to focus on if you want to have a job in cybersecurity. So it has shifted.
So it's more a question of focus now.
It's more a question of focus on knowing what's
useful and what isn't.
What do you want to specialize in? Because if you over-specialize, obviously you're going to find yourself without a job or maybe not as relevant in a few years.
Yeah.
So you have to keep an as open door as possible to make sure that you're at least have some kind of overview of the domains, but make sure that you specialize in a few of them. And of course, take a step back and keep track of what that domain is doing in the world.
Yeah, I like your point about there being so many opportunities to learning this stuff, because I like how Jesse was saying that as a security guard, he was reading bug bounty reports and capture the flag write-ups and stuff like that. There are these opportunities to learn. Did you find it easy, Jesse, to find information about this business, or was there, like Tom's saying, that problem of sort of over information and having to choose what you find relevant?
Yeah, I'd say there is the problem of there being too much information, because like if you're really fresh in the industry or not in the industry at all, you don't really know like what's really wanted.
Yeah.
Because you see, like for me, I was reading all these news articles spanning from like red teaming stuff to bug bounty stuff and everything between and outside that. And sometimes I had the issue like I didn't know what to focus on, what to read on. It's like, here's a certification you could do that might be helpful or might not be helpful. But then best thing is just like going through job postings. They usually had what they're wishing for, certifications and knowledge you need to have. That did help a bit, but still there is, in my opinion, a bit too much information for someone who doesn't know really specifically what they want to do.
So maybe that's something we have to, as an industry, we have to focus on, is sort of providing almost career advice. Like, these are sort of your choices as far as we understand them, and sort of this is what you need for this is what you need for that.
I mean, it also has to do with your background, right? I mean, most university programs that I've seen, when people who want to get into the industry, when they're still studying, they will come out of the world of application development,
right.
And then that's kind of the only thing that people focus on. But cybersecurity is a lot more, of course. So it kind of depends on: do I want to work in application security? Do I want to work in network security? Do I want to work in the bigger domain, or being a consultant? So you always have people that the way they look at the world and cybersecurity will be colored by their background. So we have people that we've interviewed where their world is application security. And when you talk about other aspects, when it comes to design, when it comes to architecture, they will just say that someone else can take care of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Like, what would you say about expectation management? Like, we have like every week we get contacted by people who say, I want to do professional red teaming, especially when you and I talk about red teaming, that almost spikes it up. But we very seldom get like an application from somebody saying, I want to do web app stuff day in and day out for the next 20 years.
Well, they do exist. And again, it all depends on what you want to specialize in and what you find challenging. Because one is not above the other. I mean, but it has to do with what the market is demanding right now. It has to do with what is being taught at universities. So when we give, or I personally give guest lectures at the technical departments of universities. I used to give classes as well on the kind of the 10 domains of one of the bigger certifications, the CISSP certifications, because it provides that baseline. And that really opens people's eyes that there's more to this than just, an application, or that hacking is more than just trying to get someone's password and trying to get in. It's way more complex than that. So it's good that through our academies and also other initiatives that we are giving this foundation to people to say, look, this is the area you can move around in. I know you have a certain background and I know you have a certain expectation, but try to get as much exposure as possible to these new domains like you've had in the beginning, to find out what you like, what you don't like, and how we can get more people into this business through your own motivation, saying, I now found my one thing, I'm going to develop it for 2-3 years, and then I'm going to pivot towards some other domain. There's room for that, but right now the only limitation you have is your own interests. School ends, education is for the rest of your life. So we just need to keep being hungry and making sure that we give this perspective to new people coming into the business.
Now, on that topic of choosing your own career and university versus vendor academies like our own, what is it that a vendor academy like the F-Secure Cybersecurity Academy offers that a college doesn't, and vice versa? Like, how do I make the choice? Which one do I want to go to?
Well, you constantly have the trade-off between, do we want to give a very wide foundation versus, train a fellow colleague and being able to answer the demands of our clients, to say they have real concrete security problems that we have to try and solve with them. So you need something from both worlds. Yeah. Right now, the most I would say almost disappointing aspect is that right now we need to have governments of countries, especially in Europe, to look at this and take this seriously and provide more formal education when it comes to cybersecurity or information security in general.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And also when you come out of a very formal educational background, one of the things that we are seeing is that, of course, and this is a thing that all juniors have when you get into this field, is that you want to see the world in a very idealistic way. Sure. In that you come across maybe a technical infrastructure of a client or something you're supposed to evaluate when it comes to security or help design. And then you come across something that is basically the equivalent of someone, installing an application, next finish. And when you start out in the business, you get really upset, right? Because how could they do this, right?
And you might well see stuff like that.
It could be, yeah. I mean, these people are obviously morons, right? But only later can you get the perspective and ask yourself the question, saying the time that was not spent on this application or this particular thing, where was that time spent? Yeah. And that gives you a far more wider view of what is this company doing or this organization. And what are they really spending their time on? And maybe this needs to come from the top rather than from the bottom up, because we can cry wolf all we want. Yeah. If we don't change things from top down, you're not going to see these changes trickle down, where maybe we're going to see more hygiene when it comes to IT security. And in the beginning, you have kind of a black and view on this, and that's fine. You need to be able to handle that as well. But later on, you develop these shades of gray, and that helps you make better decisions.
What are some curveballs that you would suggest people just getting into InfoSec should sort of keep an eye out for? Like, were there some things that caught you by surprise in this field?
This might be a bit cliche, but like a person who doesn't seem like a hacker might actually be a super, super efficient and skilled person in like an InfoSec industry. Some people I've actually worked with, the skills that they own and have, they've like been way over my expectations. And I really like look up to them in that regard, that they have these amazing skills, but then in certain situations they seem completely chill, even though
they're super hackers.
Yeah.
I think one of the main things for me where my eyes really opened was that the IT industry, which has a reputation of the last 30 to 40 years of overpromising and under-delivering, still doesn't really know what it wants, or I mean, there's this fetish belief that the industry will figure it out, and they won't, and it's a matter of how big you are in the industry, where you can try things out, like being a Google or a Facebook or whatever. But fundamentally, when we are hired in being able to consult on topics like secure architecture and penetration testing and trying to establish a risk picture, is that, at least it was my perception when I started out, that this will improve, right? This will become commodity. When's the last time in an airport you saw an ad for a firewall, right? These things are commodity now, and back in the day, this was the latest and greatest thing. And I thought back in the day, as naive as I was maybe, that this also would become commodity. That when you go into a sandwich shop and on the front door, it has a report from the government that says, this is how they handle the food, this is how they handle the hygiene, that we would have something similar for applications. Because in the end, it's also architecture. We want bridges that don't fall down, and we want apps that don't crash. And that still hasn't really come to fruition, or we don't really have that. We're kind of still in square one by saying, let's take decisions faster. Let's move our stuff to the cloud, because this other company that's way bigger than us chose it. So let's also go down that path. And the lack of that commodity and still that quick, what I think is maybe not the right way of thinking about things, that still surprises me to this day. And that was one of the first things that really opened my eyes when starting out.
It's always easier to say, we take your security seriously.
And then apologize for the breach, yeah. So for years now, we've been reading news articles about the cybersecurity talent shortage. Yet some in the field say that this is a myth, that the real problem lies in unrealistic hiring expectations. What do you guys think is the current situation in the field?
I'd say, depending on the company, some companies prefer you to have like masters and bachelors and in the relating field, instead of if you have like experience and like the motivation, because for those companies it might be that the degrees and all these, they weigh much more than the motivation, and they see that like this person has like proven success and like different masters and bachelors, and if that motivation, it doesn't weigh at all. So that becomes an issue in hiring, in my opinion, for some companies.
I think hiring has changed in information security in the last 5 years, I think. In that, about up to 5 years ago, you would see vacancies for information security consultants and cybersecurity consultants, which means we want someone with a very broad foundation that is able to specialize in certain areas and is basically able to talk about anything. That is changing when you look at vacancies that are open right now, where companies are looking for mobile security experts, red team experts, security architects. So it's much more specialized. And I think that's kind of the one clue that the education departments need to take of countries and universities, but also third-party organizations, is not to try and cram as much general or generic information into someone, but try to do it in an applied way, to saying, look, you take this course or you finish this education, and this is where you're going to end up, knowing very well that you will be specializing. And of course, you need to make sure that you keep your options open if you want to pivot from one area to the other. But we are seeing more specialized vacancies opening up. And still, even with that change, we see the organizations have problems hiring people, because again, it's very hard to find people that have kind of a knack for this, that want to learn and keep learning, even though that also has become commodity at some point. It used to be it used to be only the world of hackers and all that, but now, we need more people that can look at information security more broadly. So I think we are still lacking people on the market that want to get into this field, and we need to create incentives from all sides, the private sector as well as the governments, to get more people in this field, so that, again, we are looking at the digitalization of still a lot of governments. There's a lot of departments of governments that haven't gone through that phase or are still going through that phase. We are building the legacy systems of the next 5, 10, 15 years. We need people right now that can make sure that, we have some room to maneuver and we have some slack space when those things that we're working on or that we're using right now become legacy.
Right. I mean, we do need warm bodies in the industry, but like you're saying, we're also specializing. So we're going to need specialists tomorrow that we don't have today.
Absolutely.
Do you want to go on record with a prediction, like what's going to be a specialty that we're going to have a shortage in?
I think right now the industry or society as a whole could really benefit from more people who build systems, build applications, are architects that know about information security. Unfortunately, the industry and the way that the industry works is there's a kind of an incentive there not to do that, because the more data you have, the more you can enrich the data and, of course, monetize it. But as a standard, by default, we should be looking at information in a way that we look at, kind of a ticking time bomb, in that I don't want your personal information. If I can get rid of it, that would be great, because that means I need to guard it. So this hunger for more information, and we'll just put it in the cloud and we'll just put some AI on it and magic is going to come out. We need to start looking at this in a very sober way. So to answer your question, we need more security architects. We need more people that can design systems in the most abstract form of the word, in a way that has security and privacy built in, or at least anticipates some kind of breach or misuse or abuse. We need people to make sure that we have data audit, data privacy, data accuracy, data decommissioning, because we are building, we are building these systems for the future. We are building our own information age right now, and it seems right now we're going to end up in an information age and not be actively building one. And I think we need more people in those areas.
So how do we incentivize the people with those kinds of skill sets to sort of join us in this industry?
I think first and foremost, governments need to take care of the difference or the rift between the public sector and the private sector. As someone who's worked in the private sector for almost 17 years now, but also with clients in the public sector, it really hurts to see that the instances and institutions that need information security the most, kind of the brick and mortar of our society, the information systems that govern our governments, our defense, our critical infrastructure, energy, schools, hospitals, they need security, information security, to make sure that whatever data they're sitting on can be trusted, is kept confidential to whoever needs to have it, and is available whenever they need it. And those people right now are not getting the same level of training, education, compensation. And I think that's could be a good starting point in making sure that we level the water between the private sector and the public sector, so that, again, all of us get more career options from moving from one to the other. I would love to, start working at a hospital and keeping medical data safe, because these are extremely interesting security challenges, because you have so much accessibility that needs to be possible for medical staff and patients, versus it's some of the most critical data that you could be sitting on, where you literally have someone's life in your hands depending on what is sitting in a database. So I think that could be a really good starting point, but also to look at the current educational systems and say, okay, how can we make information security part of this?
So one of you guys basically got into the hacking before there even was an internet. And one of you is a very millennial internet age digital native. If you had your roles reversed, do you guys you'd still get into the hacking? Yes. How does it sound, the hard dumpster diving road that Tom had to take?
I would say eventually, yeah, but it would take a longer time for me to get into and actually get so interested in the whole industry.
So what about you, Tom? Did young Tom have the self-discipline to sort of shift through all that noise of information and sort of pick out the grains of truth and sort of get into this industry?
I think so, because for me back in the day, it was about learning and being the master of a certain domain. So for me, it was really the hunger of knowing or finding out how things work and making it do my bidding. And I would probably be a little bit confused as far as how much is out there right now. But yes, definitely, I would be in the same industry doing the same thing. Maybe I would have picked a different, or maybe over-specialize in a certain subject, and maybe stay in there rather than the kind of the broad foundation that you would need to get in the industry back then. But certainly, I would still be in this industry.
I mean, I remember when I was like 7 years old or so, my parents put a time lock on the computer, on like that when I can use the computer and stuff like that.
How long did that last?
Probably like 2 weeks.
Oh, there you go.
Because then
What took you so long?
Because I was annoyed I wasn't able to play any games. So then I was just seeing how could I, like, for example, bypass this time lock. So then I kind of knew when the time window is, when I can access it. And then I did know you can go to the BIOS and you can go change the system time from there. So then I went there and I changed the system time to the certain time I could be on the computer. And then by that way, I could just log in normally.
I'm reading Edward Snowden's book, and on one of the first pages it says the first thing that any kid learns to hack is time. Is when to go to bed, changing clocks, anything that they can do either by opening a new conversation or showing something, whatever it is that they do to stretch bedtime. And I think we're pretty good at that as human beings.
Time hackers.
Yeah, maybe not like that, but yeah, in that sense, it's something that we're all trying to manipulate to just get what we want. And I think the essence of hacking is kind of based on that, is trying to make your own rules, bend the ones that are there, make up your own, and be the lord and commander of your own little domain or system.
I'm actually surprised that doesn't lead to more hubris, where people are like, once you're always breaking the rules, you're always bending the rules. Does that lead into like a mindset where nothing is true and nothing is carved in stone and everything's possible?
I mean, it has raised the stakes. And then, I mean, the hacking, for example, that was done during the 90s and the early 2000s, I mean, if you got into a system, I mean, everyone was basically running an involuntary bug bounty. So you got a T-shirt and a mug and they said, more power to you, but just please don't do it again. If you do the same thing now as part of a quote unquote prank, I mean they give you an orange pajama and they send you to Cuba. Yeah. So things have changed, but luckily also on the educational side, where we have these war games, these hacker games, virtualization, where you can just try things out without hurting anyone. Unfortunately, some of the people out there haven't gotten that message and still consider the internet their playground. And that's just kind of a sign of the times.
That's an interesting point to bring up, the ethics of hacking, because like we're seeing a lot of young kids who seem to have a potential for this field, but then they do a couple of stupid mistakes too many in their young age, and then they're damaged goods after that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a computer is just a tool and a multiplier, right? So if someone wants to do something stupid, that's not going to be multiplied by whatever technology they can get their hands on. Mm. So you'll always have criminals that leverage. This is the eternal hacker versus cracker discussion,
right? But like these are not bad kids. They're like misguided. They don't know better. So should our hacker training for young people be more about like what is right and what is wrong?
Again, the stakes are higher because when I was growing up, I mean, the worst you could do is maybe do something over the phone, or you could, toilet paper your local school. But someone with the right skills right now, even just being young and foolish and trying to, prove something for yourself or to others, that can go horribly wrong right now with the access or the things that are connected to the internet right now.
Yeah, you can do some real damage.
Exactly. So we need to, regardless of whatever specialized education you take or whatever academy you take, that also needs to be taught in school, saying that there is something, there is right and wrong when it comes to computers, because these things, govern our lives now. So you need to know what the boundaries are and what, at least to some extent, what the law is as far as what is fair computer use and what is not.
Right. Yeah, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
That was our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and you can reach us with questions and comments on Twitter through F-Secure with the hashtag CyberSauna. Thanks for listening.